Welcome back to Our Canada, Our Future. We're talking government deficits, spending in the economy with Jerome Gessaroli, Professor of Finance at the BC Institute of Technology and a visiting fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Jerome, we were just talking about the change in interest rates. I wanted to contrast the Liberal government of today and the deficits they're running with the Liberal government of the early 1990s, when we had John Chrétien as Prime Minister and Paul Martin as Finance Minister. They took a very different approach to government spending. And I'm wondering if you could sort of, what are your thoughts on what's different today from then? And do you see this Liberal government being able to do what that Liberal government did and get the budget back to balance?
Yeah, what in the mid '90s, under the Chrétien government, and when Paul Martin was finance minister, Canada actually was facing a real debt problem. We were approaching the limit of the amount of debt that we could support and the interest costs. So, quite frankly, the government had to do something, and to their credit, they did. They made some hard choices and they cut back on spending and they brought the deficit down. And that was continued under successive governments, including the Conservative government later on. And that was done under the realization that there was a limit that we could borrow, and we were approaching it. Now, due to that hard work, we've got some financial flexibility to borrow more, and the Liberal government right now is taking advantage of that and borrowing more. There's a couple of interesting telling points. The Prime Minister once said, Trudeau said that the budgets will balance themselves. That's a little bit of an astonishing comment. The budgets won't balance themselves. It takes some fiscal discipline and some hard decisions to balance budgets. Chrystia Freeland, in the budget speech for 2021 as finance minister, she said interest rates are at very low levels, and so we should take advantage of that and borrow more. Well, I understand the logic behind that, but you have to be very careful when you're borrowing more at low interest rates, because low interest rates don't stay low forever. Interest rates are market driven. So if we load up the back of the truck with debt, and when rates are low, we can handle that. But then when rates increase later on, we could find ourselves in a very difficult position.
That's a very good point. I wanted to just do an Econ 101 moment, because I know this is a terminology issue that a lot of people don't make the distinction on. The difference between deficits and debt. I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably. So maybe you could sort of explain what is the difference between deficits and debt?
Sure. Well, when we say that a government is running a deficit, we say that it's spending more than it's bringing in tax revenue, say over a period of the year. So, for instance, the government of Ontario is running a deficit of roughly $13 billion for the year. But when we talk about debts, government debts, we refer to everything that the government owes, not just what they borrowed in the most recent year, but whatever they borrowed in the past that hasn't yet been repaid. So in that way, the debt is a cumulative figure. And again, looking at the Ontario example, I believe that the debt in Ontario is the total debt is about $400 billion. And that's quite large. The debt per capita per person in Canada has increased. In 2010, it was about $16,000 per person, the overall debt. 2020, it's at $28,000 per person. So we can see the relative rapid increase in the amount of overall government debt.
Some people don't like the analogy of the credit card, but do you think it's a reasonable analogy that a deficit is when you put more on your card than you pay off in 1 month, but the debt is the balance that you carry on the card over time that you're paying interest on every month?
Well, in general, conceptually, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. I mean, there are some fundamental differences between government borrowing and individuals borrowing. Governments have the ability to tax, okay, and it's theoretically an unlimited ability. So that is a major difference between looking at individuals and the government when it comes to borrowing. But having said that, the government will face similar type limits, and the reason why it's limited as individuals do on how much we can borrow.
Okay, great comments from Jerome Gessaroli. Well, we're going to take a short break.